I wanted to explore with you today a theme. It's from seeing a television programme, a classic one called Faking It, all about people being trained up in a very short space of time to perform at a high level. And then I thought I'm going to pull out some books which relate to the themes of the programme. And this is what this video is going to be about. I encourage you to do the same if you fancy, if it inspires you as well, to pull out books from your shelf and show them as well. So the whole theme really of Faking It is the character arc. It's the story of somebody who begins in one kind of way and is given opportunities and training and becomes an opportunity to be something else, and something else that's held in high regard. So it's a little bit like Pygmalion, My Fair Lady, that story. Many of the books are going to be factually based ones, are going to be non-fiction, but here's one that's fiction. And it's to do with a myth, the whole myth of the ring cycle. And what happens is a very normal, average English guy, quite quiet and shy, accidentally is given the powers to for the Tarnhelm and the ring, which means he rules the world effectively. And he's kind of beset by doubts. Surely it shouldn't be him. Surely it should be his older sister, who's far more confident, always knows exactly what she wants to say or do. Instead, it's him. But in the meantime, a whole raft of characters from the Norse myth after him, aiming to get the ring off him and the power that is in the ring. Can Malcolm cope with the responsibility? Will the different gods and goddesses get the power from him? And what is he going to do with the power? And does it matter what he does or says or thinks when he's ruler of the world? This is comedy, written by Tom Holt. It's a little bit like Terry Pratchett, although I don't like actually saying one writer's like another, because they're all slightly different. And I loved this book. Really funny, short, much beloved in our family, as you can see by the wear and tear. This big book, you can't avoid seeing What Colour Is Your Parachute? This is a fantastic book. It's non-fiction and it's aimed at helping people find what they could be doing in life as a career. Lots of questions to fill out. It will take you through that whole process, and I totally recommend it to you. There's a different one brought out every year. It doesn't really matter, although for preference I actually like the older ones. They're much, I think, a bit deeper than this, but there's a lot more personal, taking you through it with the original person who wrote it, which is Richard N. Bowles. This one is with Catherine Brooks, but if you can get a Richard N. Bowles, look out for it in your sales of library books. Any library should have one copy, and definitely any careers library, anywhere, anytime, should have a copy of this. Brilliant to look at for a way of thinking about yourself that's positive, thinking about the job market, thinking about who you truly are. And one of the most insightful exercises was to think back to things you enjoyed doing when you were very, very young, maybe between the ages of 5 and 10, and that actually contains a lot of clues to what is truly you and your strengths and unusual. And since reading this book, and just more recently for some reason or other, I've come across so many people who find and trace back their original passion in life and what they became known for to something they loved to do when they were 8 years old. The kind of thing you just love to do when you've got a free day, or when you're maybe feeling a bit upset, and something that you go and do and it calms you and you think, oh right, you know, whatever kind of hobby that is, that could well be a clue to your happiest place to work in life. Now DVD. And before you complain about that on a booktube, the truth is this was spawned from a short story. And because of that, I was kind of put off. The Walter Mitty story is a James Thurber story. It became a kind of musical, and then many years later, much more modern, this emerged. And I watched it with my husband. He absolutely loved the film. I hated it because it was so completely different from the short story, and it seemed to me to be just absurd and didn't like it at all. And then after that, I kept listening. He'd be listening to music and I would say, oh, that's gorgeous music. What is that? And he would say, it's from Mitty. And then eventually that information became, what's the music? It's from that film you don't like, very pointedly. So I watched the film again, and the second viewing, when I just let it be itself and not putting on any expectations from the earlier version, the books, I just was blown away by it. I found it to be life-affirming, positive, and I felt I could go away and write a PhD thesis on it and what it meant about getting involved in life, being active in it, and developing as a person, because that's what happens in this particular film. It's comedic, it's easy to watch, you could watch it with anybody at all, and I just think it's fantastic, so warmly recommended. Ooh, how about this? I went into a bookshop in Edinburgh, not even knowing this book existed, and the cover was just perfect. Selfie. And the fact that it is a mirrored. Ooh. I just could not get past it. Now, it was judging a book by its cover, but it was so perfect in line. So it's perfectly in line with what the content is about. So it's called Selfie. I don't know if you can see it there. Selfie, how we became so self-obsessed and what it's doing to us. So I love that. It's written by Will Storr, who's gone on to write another book about writing, telling stories. Let me just grab it. This is the more recent book by Will Storr, and appropriately, I mean, his name is halfway to storytelling, which is what he's talking about here. The science of storytelling. It's not actually a pun. He's genuinely giving you some good information. And there's a huge queue of people waiting to say yes. Blurbs at the front saying how fantastic the book is. Selfie. It's very thick, but you will read it very fast because it's written in a very person-to-person kind of way. And the chapter headings are the dying self, the tribal self, the perfectible self, the bad self, the good self, the special self, the digital self, and how to stay alive in the age of perfectionism. So, I mean, that sounds like it could become maybe too academic, but if you look at it, you can see there's lots of he said, she said, this happened, taking you there. So he sets out to experience different things. I find it quite ooh, get nice. Ooh, light. Actually, I could hold it there. Maybe it might light up that other side of my face. Maybe I'll just hold it there for the rest of this presentation. So, yeah, it's quite an uneven book because each chapter is him going through a completely different experience purposefully to see what it will reveal to him about the whole idea of the self. So it's a bit of a kind of a curate's egg in a way. Something to maybe start you thinking, debating, an interesting book to read. I wouldn't recommend rushing out and buying it like I did. It is a hardback, it's not cheap, but the cover is fantastic and just so perfect to do with the subject area. So yeah, do be aware of it, do read it. Okay, Isle of Noises. This is all about songwriting. It's absolutely brilliant. It takes you through how different songs were written. So it's all about creating a fiction in a sense, though quite often it's based on something that happened in real life. And here's the particular songwriters. It's called Isle of Noises, Daniel Rachel, Conversations with Great British Songwriters. And the list of songwriters is just phenomenal. Love the cover again. This nice block of colour down the side. It's quite large, as you can see. You're not going to slip this into your pocket as you go. So you do tend to read it on a table. Sort of open it out, read it like that. But look at the end papers. Look, just fabulous, full of colour. So it's published in 2013. And it's taking a quote from William Shakespeare: "Be not afeard, the isle is full of noises," from The Tempest, and that's what's then they're using it to speak about. So I'll just run down the list of the contents. Is simply the list of the songwriters, so I'll just read it down quickly. Ray Davies, Robin Gibb, Jimmy Page, Brian Ferry, Joan Armatrading, Chaz Jankel, John Lydon, Mick Jones, Paul Weller, Sting, Andy Partridge, Chris Difford and Glenn Tilbrook. Madness, Andy Lennox, Billy Bragg, Johnny Marr, Neil Tennant, Chris Lowe, Lee Mavers, Damon Albarn, Noel Gallagher, Jarvis Cocker, Lily Allen, Laura Marling. And there's got to be at least one of those you like, surely. So a very short introduction, and then you're into the format. And the format is to have an interview. So a little bit of backdrop to the particular writer, and then there's an interview which is quite clear to follow. Bold is the question asked, and then the person responding just speaks back. You get the amusing thing about it, I think, is where they show the back of fag packs, little bits of note papers that the original is written on, because you can see all the crossouts. You can see that it's not been written in the oneer, but it's been worked on, and just fantastic. I got this book while I was part of a songwriting circle when I lived in a different area, and it's just brilliant backlog. For anyone who's wanting to write music, songs, it's brilliant because it's like having all these characters in the room with you, telling you how to tell a story. And quite often there will be a ballad, it'll be a story about a person. So it fits within our topic today for the fiction of faking it, for presenting it, for having a face, a front on a person. Very readable, very, very enjoyable. I haven't sat down and read it all the way through, but I pick it up every now and then and look at it. It's just, you can just read one person, and the lives are fascinating. Now it's a hot day, so I'm going to keep glugging at the water here. Let me show you my system. A nice glass with some ice and a lemon, because plain water is not particularly tasty to me. Filling it up from a thermos. Yum. Hopefully this will it's not just a massive indulgence, but it's going to stop me coughing loudly into the microphone and blowing your ears off. Following on from that, looking again at the whole idea of theatre itself, U2 show. Oh, right. I might help better. This is a tome. It's telling you the story of the whole idea of taking U2 on the road, what's involved. And it's fabulous. It works for so many different levels. Even if you're not intending to take a band and take the world by storm, it's looking behind the scenes at a phenomenon, and actually it's showing the whole range of arts that are in their shows. Obviously there's the visual ones, you can see that immediately from the graphics, but they cannot be meaningless, they have to be complementary and adding something to the music and the whole sense and the ambience. And it takes a whole team to do this, as you can probably guess from the size of their performances and the fact that for them it is an art form. Going on tour is not just standing up on stage with good lights to be seen and singing in front of a blank backdrop. It's a whole experience. So when you look through this book, and I'll have to do some takeaway shots, otherwise you'll feel very, very deprived. The photography is superb, and the whole approach, it talks you through tours they've done. Now it's outdated, obviously. It's by Diana Scrimgeour. When you see the contents page, you kind of, again, visually, it's very clear. words, pictures, colour are very much part of it all. So here's kind of chapters. Let me see. U2 and Rock Music, A Spectacle by Michael Bracewell. Art, Commerce, Logistics, Designer U2 Tour by Willie Williams, their designer. Words, Agents, Tour Management, Sound, Production, Design, Staging, Show Video Presentation, Production, Show Video Content, Show Filming, Wardrobe, Band Crew, Recording, Graphics, Promoters, Media, Charity Shows, Friends, Contributors and Interviewees, Biographies. If you want to be a band, if you've got a band that you want to make big, this is going to be how to look through it all. But it's pop culture and it tells a story, and it is such a wonderful mixture of words and images, thoughtfulness, the whole approach to it. I cannot recommend it highly enough. There's just so many ways in which it's a delight, an absolute delight. And it's an intermediate thing, because which is where you've got the different arts working together, inter-arts, and it is a whole thing. In a sense, there's a technical term for it. Wagner was very keen on Gesamtkunstwerk, a whole artwork. The idea that in one space, the physical space itself and the lighting and the sound and the backdrop and music and what is being said are all part of one wonderful piece of art. So that's what this is all about, this book. You could just look through it in the pictures, to be honest. So I love this book. I recommend it highly, highly, highly. If you're a U2 fan, you probably have it already. If you don't, and you're interested in music and music presentation as an art form, it's worth getting. And now, another kind of performance art, which is comedy. Comedians, stand-up comedians. Ha Bloody Ha, Comedians Talking by William Cook. This is a bit of a historical piece. It was written published in 1994, and it's interviewing a lot of comedians who were very popular in Britain at the time. Now, some of them still are, and that's where it actually becomes interesting and relevant, because it's them talking at the start of their careers. So the book, the way it's laid out is it's written by William Cook, who at the time was, I think, the arts comedy critic of The Guardian, television editor of the Modern Review. Okay. And he basically gives a little introduction, and then he gives a little biography of the featured comedians. This, for example, is Joe Brand, who's very much alive and well and on TV. Frank Skinner here is talked about as being very, the word is lewd. Yeah, his humour is lewd. And there's a whole lot of kind of Chaucerian relish about his bedroom gags. Whereas more recently, he has written Frank Skinner, A Comedian's Prayer Book, which is very funny and sincere and talks about faith. And he's gone back to his original Catholic faith. So that's rather brilliant. Very tiny, small book, very recently published. Worth getting. My fashion, as I said earlier, I'm an addict to Project Runway, and a friend kindly gifted me this, Aris. It's about Aris. Well, first of all, one of the main points of interest to me is that it's a film by Albert Maysles, who I absolutely love. He invented direct cinema, and the idea is that you keep filming, and he takes this to heart with her. She's a fashion icon, and she used to be an interior designer, including working for providing materials for the White House, which she starts to talk about, and in this her husband kind of shushes her up. But she has a very personal, idiosyncratic style which involves a lot of jewellery, and she's also got these extremely large round glasses which she's well known for, and she has her own fashion style. She's great fun, and this comes across in the DVD. She's also an avid collector. If you collect things and your partner thinks that it's too much, you need to see her apartment's full of clothes, and when I say clothes, I mean designer clothes. And she has whole rimfuls from her lifetime's collection. So it's something to show to someone who says, you collect X too much. To go, well, I'm not Iris. But she's a wonderful person. It's great to see her. Coming towards the end here finally, you'll be glad to hear, I want to show you a book for poetry. If you are a keen fan of the English Romantic poets, and in particular Coleridge, this is a phenomenal book. It's by Malcolm Guite, who's a poet himself, which means that of course it's well written and it reads well. A Voyage with Samuel Coleridge, Taylor Coleridge, Mariner. So it's looking at, he wrote the Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, and what Malcolm Guite has done is he has applied that kind of story as a metaphor for Samuel Taylor Coleridge's own life. In amongst it all, he becomes unfortunately addicted. The writer is very gifted. He's very helpful to Wordsworth, if you're into Wordsworth as a poet. And along the way, unfortunately, he becomes addicted to a kind of pain release thing, and it affects him for the rest of his life. It affects his marriage, his relationships, how he can cope with life. And yet behind it all, there's a great mind thinking amazing thoughts about what it is to be alive, to think, to be conscious, to be a human being. And he's living, of course, at an amazing time in history. So I warmly recommend this book to you. It's the kind of book to sit down with and just get lost in. If you read Coleridge anyway, this will give you so much background to what's going on. And it also doesn't miss out on looking at not just the story of the ancient mariner shooting the albatross, but also the tragedy of the birds and so forth that is happening in our current day and age. Just one little piece out of this huge, humongous, wonderful tome, which, as you can see, is quite often in the background, or I drag it forward to speak about it at any given opportunity. The Oxford Book of Humorous Prose. And there was a particular story in it which was wondered if it was we weren't sure if it was a hoax or a real book because of the way it was written. In 1919, one of Britain's most successful humorous publications was a late Victorian romantic novelette written by a 9-year-old schoolgirl. The manuscript of The Young Visitors, ill-spelt almost without punctuation, was submitted to the publishers Chatto and Windus with a note explaining that it had been written when the authoress was only 9. They decided to publish. There was a little kind of question mark. Was she real? Was this a genuine thing, or was it a famous, well-known writer pretending to be a young girl? But they investigated, and Daisy Ashford turned out to be genuine. An agreeable lady in her late 30s who really had written the story in pencil in a 2-penny notebook when she was 9, and then left it forgotten in a drawer. So it's called The Young Visitors. So the friend of one of the main characters, his friend Bernard, is very gentlemanly, quote, rather bent in the middle with very nice long legs, unquote. So you've got things like this. And a little comment about a character who can afford to tip £2.60 without even thinking about it. So you've got all these kind of things going on. It's all kind of described the kind of child's innocence, and yet it's a kind of romance story. It kind of reads a bit at the end like the Owl and the Pussycat, the little Edward Lear poem. All very innocent and lovely. Those are my books. Things which I feel fit into the theme of faking it. Putting on a show, putting on a brave face, or training to become something other than you are, or going through some life-changing choices. And I'd love to hear yours, your recommendations on the same theme. Bye for now.